Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are all having an amazing day so far. So in this video we will be creating a very huge sort of Mediterranean house which is sort of inspired by Spanish and Italian homes. And on the top left of your screen you can see that I actually named it the Italian style mansion because that was sort of like the main style that I was going for this build when I was originally building it. But then as I kept building and building it, I sort of like realized that it sort of represented a more Spanish style mansion rather than an Italian one. So that's just like kind of what I went with instead. And we're actually starting off with the shell of this entire home. So we're actually creating this very huge and extravagant 3-tiered house, which wasn't actually my main goal, but I'm just really happy with how this build turned out overall. And I was initially inspired to build a house like this because of Sofia Vergara, because she had a tour of her house on Architecture Digest, which I feel like really did inspire me to create something in this style, which I haven't really done that often or ever on the channel. And because I really liked the way her house looked, I wanted to recreate something like it in the Sims 4 as well. And in real life her house is actually 2 floors, whereas our one in the game is 3 floors. And the main reason for that was because as I was building this I realized like it didn't really look that interesting with it only being like a 2-floor home. So instead I just added like a third small tier, which I feel like really did elevate the house and just make it look a lot more interesting overall, which you guys will definitely see throughout this entire video, how it really does change the entire exterior of this entire build overall. And so far we're just creating the right wing of this home, which is sort of placed on this diagonal, and it just really works really well with this house, which sort of like making it sort of like closed in, and it's sort of like the garage area of this home, which is like really interesting. And I just feel like it really does add a lot to the exterior of this home, which you guys would see how I created that interesting sort of garage area, because I didn't just like add a simple sort of like garage door and call it a day. I sort of like created some sort of like interesting archways and used some interesting sort of like doors that came from the Horse Ranch expansion pack, just to make it look a bit more interesting than it really was, rather than adding like some boring gray sort of like garage door, if that makes sense. And we're also starting off with the roofing for this house, which was relatively complex, so I didn't want to bore you guys with making you guys watch all of that, so I did actually skip it. And so far you can see how complex the roofing actually looks, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense right now. However, it does not stay like that at all. It actually changes completely, mainly because we added that third tier in, and I just feel like there was just like a lot of adjustments that had to be made off camera just to make everything make sense, because I didn't want like a lot of like random roof pieces just like poking out and whatnot. And as you guys can see, like for the back garden area we do have a lot of these very nice arches sort of just like lined up all together, and I really paid attention to utilizing those arches in particular, which I believe are base game, rather than using some arch that came from either like Cats and Dogs or from the Last Track expansion pack, mainly because I wasn't really going for like a modern sort of design. So I didn't want to like make it very simple, if that makes sense. I wanted to utilize as much detail as possible, especially because we were going for like more of that Italian or Spanish style. And we do also have a catwalk sort of situation that goes throughout the entire home, which sort of connects everything together, and it just makes everything a little bit more accessible by just like having pathways pretty much everywhere where your Sims can like sort of walk on and interact. So if they need to go from one place to another, they can easily use those specifically designed pathways to like go to those specific areas, if that makes sense. And I just feel like it really does tie in the entire home together really well. And this is the part of the home where we have the garage area, which is like fully custom, and I just feel like it turned out really great. And I just filled it with a bunch of different like functional activities and objects that your Sim can use, and it just like is a really functional room in my opinion. And we do also have 14 or 15 bedrooms in total in this build, so if you guys do feel like you don't have a lot of space, you could definitely change one of those into being whatever you want in particular. But this house pretty much has everything that you would pretty much need, such as like gym, movie theater, a bunch of offices, as well as like a lot of living spaces, whether they're on the 3rd floor, 2nd floor, 3rd floor. We pretty much have several on each floor. And we do also have quite a lot of art rooms and a lot of like book rooms as well, so you can just like sit down and wind down, be creative, or if you want to like read a book or whatnot. We do also have 2 different like sort of styles of offices. So we have one with like the Get Famous sort of computer, which sort of like is like that YouTuber career, but we do also have another one of those offices where it's just like a general one that I really do like creating on these like 1st floors of these like really huge mega mansions. And that is pretty much all the extra stuff that we have on top of the actual 14 bedrooms overall, which bear in mind they all have their own en-suites as well as like public toilets on like the first floor and second floor and whatnot. So I feel like there's pretty much like 15 or 16 toilets in this entire build overall as well. So yeah, it's pretty much a very big build, and I'm just really happy to be finally sharing it with you guys. And I also really want to show my appreciation and say thank you very much for all of the support and love that a lot of you guys have been showing me recently on like my most recent video, and especially about reaching that 2,000 subscriber milestone. I just feel like there's been a lot of nice feedback and a lot of nice people that have been sort of like joining the channel, and I just really appreciate it. And if you guys aren't a member of the channel, I highly recommend, if you guys are interested in these sort of like Sims 4 huge mansion builds, because I do like to post these quite often now, and I just feel like you guys would really feel interested if you guys like this sort of stuff. And I do also provide a tour of these builds towards the end of the video, so make sure to stay tuned towards the end of the video if you guys are interested in checking out the entire home, because I don't really show every single build or every single sort of like room that I'm decorating in all of these speed builds. I just feel like we'll be here for a very long time if I did do that. But yeah, so make sure to stick around towards the end of the video to check out that sort of tour that I have, which showcases the entire build, and you guys can pretty much see every single room that you guys want to see or are interested within any of my builds that have a tour in them. And yeah, so far we're sort of like focusing on creating that sort of third floor to look a bit more interesting, and just like adding a bunch of windows and whatnot. And I noticed that quite a lot of those windows were repetitive, so I did actually end up changing some of them just to make it feel a bit more interesting and unique. And we do also have a pool house in this very huge sort of like garden, so we actually utilize that as some sort of like butler sort of room or house, if you want to call it that. So it has pretty much every single amenity that you really need to sort of like survive, so you don't really need them to sort of like use your house or to like live in your house, if that makes sense. So you could just pretty much assign them to live in this house in particular, and they will just pretty much do everything in here while also working in your own home, if that makes sense. And we do also change a lot of the roof design throughout the entire video, whether it was on or off the camera. I just pretty much like focused and changed quite a lot of the stuff that I felt like didn't really look that interesting. So you guys will definitely see a lot of changes happening throughout the entire video. And yeah, once I added that very bright sort of like orange color to the roof, I just feel like it really did make the house stand out more than it really did, because I feel like that basic default sort of like gray sort of like roof texture just made the house seem very dull and uninteresting, whereas when I added that pop of color, I just feel like it really made the house stand out a lot more than it really did, and it just makes the house look a lot more interesting. And I also covered this entire build with a lot of these like shrubs and hedges throughout the entire build, whether they were those really skinny ones or just like a lot of plants and greenery throughout the entire home, which I feel like makes it look really lived in and realistic. And as well as like a lot of terrain textures and painting, which I had to skip through because they were just really time consuming, but I spent a lot of time just like trying to make it look as interesting as possible without making it feel like very overcrowded or too busy, just making it seem like as realistic as possible. So for example, on this curve that we have for the garden, I didn't want to like finish it and cover it up completely with those hedges, but rather some areas or certain parts of it, which I feel like made it look a lot more interesting and sophisticated in comparison to like just like completely closing it off, which I feel like wouldn't really make it look that interesting. And for the pool area, we do have curved pools. However, I didn't want to use the built-in pool, curved pool sort of like system, mainly because I wanted to create a specific sort of design, and I couldn't really recreate that within the space that I have given myself because it was relatively small. So the way I did this was by using a bunch of like these very tall columns that came from Sparday, and sort of just like sized them down and just like created like a specific shape that I wanted, and sort of lowered it down by using the tool mod, and it just sort of like works the way that I wanted it to, and it just like is the shape that I kind of was going for, which I couldn't really recreate with the original sort of like functionalities and build tool that we have with the curved pool, if that makes sense. So yeah, I just feel like it turned out really nicely, and it does also work and it's completely functional, so there's no problem with like utilizing that specific sort of like method or way of creating curved pools, if that makes sense. And for the greenhouse area, you might have noticed that I'm actually using the greenhouse haven doors but not the windows, and that's mainly because I wanted those windows that had that really nice curved detail on them, which sort of like matched the archway that we have going on throughout the entire build, and I just really love the color of that green that it had in particular for that window frame, which was kind of just like this very muted sort of green color rather than that really bright sort of green that we have from the Greenhouse Haven kit, which I feel like makes it look a bit more realistic rather than making it look like it's really new, if that makes sense. And we will go back into the greenhouse later on just to like add some extra details in there and whatnot. But so far we're focusing on the sort of like pergola sort of situation that we have in the center of like the garden area, which I really do like the way it looks. It just looks really nice, and I also added some curtains on either side of the columns, which made it look so interesting, which you guys will see later on in the video. And moving on to the interior of this build, we kind of focus on incorporating a lot of traditional as well as modern object pieces. So for the kitchen in this case, we're actually focusing on creating a more traditional looking one, mainly because I feel like a lot of Mediterranean styled homes do incorporate a lot of traditional objects and just like a lot of furniture that seems very old-fashioned and traditional. So in this case, we're kind of going for this very wooden textured looking counterpiece, which came from the cottage living expansion pack, which I feel like look really nice and just fits with the overall like vibe that I was kind of going for. And I really love the island counter sort of design that I have going on throughout this entire kitchen. I just feel like it fills up the space and makes it look really nice. And we did also make it functional by adding a oven on one of the sides of the counters, which I feel like is quite an interesting choice to make. And I just feel like it really does look nice overall, and I really love the way the kitchen actually turned out because it's just very huge and extravagant. And I of course created one of those small like little coffee stations on one of the sides of the build, which I feel like also look really nice by staring out into like the distance from the window and whatnot. And we do also have a very nice small sort of like dining table area sort of like dedicated to it, which is sort of like connected by arches rather than doors, because I just feel like the open space looks really nice and it kind of like makes sense with the mixture between the traditional and modern sort of like theme that I was going for. I feel like a lot of modern homes would have a lot of these like open floor plan styled designs, but it does also incorporate a lot of these traditional furnitures, which I really do love the way they look. And I was kind of going for a bluish theme throughout the entire build, so we would see a lot of different color variations and hues of blue throughout the entire build, which I feel like looks so nice and just very elegant and luxurious, especially with like that mixture of white and bright beiges. I just feel like it really works well overall. And for the entrance room, I actually utilized a very elegant looking wallpaper for this room just to make it feel a bit more inviting and interesting. And I also utilized these very nice wooden sort of like storage cupboard sort of units on either side of the walls just to make it look a bit more interesting. And I just added some mirrors just to make it feel a bit more inviting, as well as like some sort of like coat hangers and some like umbrella holders and whatnot, just to make it feel a bit more homey and interesting. And this is actually the biggest living space that we have in this entire build, so I wanted to make it as cozy as possible by utilizing some of my favorite objects, such as like that Dream Home Decorator modular sofa pieces, as well as like that very nice book nook sort of like couch that really looks nice with all of those pillows. And I really wanted to incorporate a lot of pillows on that custom sort of like sofa that I created as well, just to make it feel a bit more cozy and comfortable as well. And I also placed a bunch of like shelving units and storage spaces and like just a bunch of cupboards around just to make it feel a bit more homey and realistic, as if you were like collecting stuff and adding stuff onto it over time, which I feel like makes it look really interesting. And we do also have additional living spaces on the other side, which is sort of like a more formal sort of like living space. And we do also have another one as well that leads towards this sort of like bedroom area on the first floor, which is kind of just like a more informal one with the addition of a bar, and it also has like its own sort of like garden area, if that makes sense. And this is actually the first bedroom that we have on the first floor out of the two, and it just incorporates a very simple style which looks relatively elegant with a lot of like gold features and whatnot, which does also have its own ensuite. And we're actually moving on to the main office area of this entire build, which is situated on the first floor right next to the entrance, which is kind of like where I like doing them for most of my build, because I just feel like it makes a lot more sense and it's realistic. And I kind of like made it sort of like have the same design as the bedroom did, with like the elegance and sort of like making it look as modern as possible, with the addition of having like some sort of like nice seating area incorporated into it. It's just like a small sort of like wind down area if you want to like read a book or whatnot. But I also made it feel a bit more formal by incorporating a lot of like seating area next to the desk and whatnot, just to try to make it look a bit more professional and whatnot, and just added like a bunch of clutter here and there just to make it feel as realistic as possible. And the empty room beside it does end up becoming an ensuite for the office. And we do also have a very nice little garage area for this entire build, which is fully functional, and it's just like filled with a bunch of activities and whatnot that your Sims can do rather than leaving it like a simple like decorative space, if that makes sense. So I even added the like sort of like crystal sort of like table, which you can create like your own jewelry on it and whatnot. So yeah, just like a bunch of different activities from different packs just to make it feel a bit more functional. And we do also have a nice sort of like laundry room off to the side of the garage area, which I kind of made sense to put next to the garage and the side door that sort of like leads to like the other part of the home, which I feel like kind of like made sense. And I really went with that nice simple like baby blue theme that I was kind of like going for throughout this entire build, which I really do love. And I kind of like recreate the same sort of design throughout all of my laundry rooms because I just really like the way they end up looking, in my opinion. And this is the small little movie room theater space that we have going on for this build, which I don't really utilize quite often in a lot of my other mansions, but I just feel like because we had so much space in this one, I kind of like felt like it made sense to like incorporate a nice sort of like movie room into this build. And we do also have a gym right next to it by utilizing a very interesting and unique red theme going throughout all of the items in this build. And I just really like the way the floor pattern even looks for this specific gym as well. I just feel like it looks really interesting. And I actually happen to be using the Love Struck gym sort of like mirrors quite often, especially with like those dumbbell racks as well. I just use them quite often in my gyms. I just feel like they look really good. But yeah, moving on to the second floor, we're actually starting with one of the big bedrooms that we have on this floor in particular. And you may be wondering why this bedroom has an arch leading into it. However, that does end up changing, but I had the idea of creating some sort of living space which has its own balcony as well that sort of like leads to the bedroom off from the living space, if that makes sense. So I remember from Kim Kardashian's house in real life incorporating something like this in her own sort of like living space, where she had a small sort of like living space room that led to her bedroom, which I feel like was really elegant and just like something that a wealthy person would have. So I felt like incorporating something like that into this build as well, rather than keeping it as like some sort of like open sort of living space, which we already have several of in this entire build. So yeah, I just felt like creating something like that, which was quite interesting for this entire build. And we're also going for a very nice simple theme for this bedroom as well, with a very nice like open beige sort of like goldish color, which I feel like blended in really well with all of the white that we had going on throughout this entire build. And I've been utilizing quite a lot of clutter throughout this entire build as well, such as like a lot of these books, a lot of like the journal sort of like writing one, as well as like the tray with like the mug in it. I just feel like they're such realistic items that you would have scattered throughout your entire sort of like house. So yeah, I just feel like it kind of made sense to populate that throughout the entire build. And I actually do show the bathroom for this one, as well as like the walk-in closet sort of area, just to like show you guys how I actually did these en suites, just so you guys get like an idea of what they kind of like look like. But I don't show every single one of them, just so you guys don't really get bored of seeing the same bathroom getting recreated every single time. But they do obviously have their own sort of like color schemes and whatnot, depending on what bathroom or bedroom they're associated to, if that makes sense. And we do also have a very nice, simple, small looking sort of like walk-in closet area, just to like add to the extraness of this bedroom in particular, because I feel like no other bedroom has this amount of luxury in this entire build. Despite all of them being relatively big and having their own ensuite, they don't have like their own living room or whatnot. So yeah, I just felt like it was kind of like an interesting bedroom to show you guys. And this is actually the sort of like artist sort of like comfy room that you would like sort of sit in and just like hang out in. And if you want to be creative, you can just like go create art or just like read a book, which sort of leads out to this very huge sort of balcony area that looks out towards like the front part of the home, which I thought looked really interesting and nice. And this is actually the master bedroom that I sort of classified in my head for the second floor, which in my opinion is kind of like the nicest room in the house, in my opinion, because it's kind of like in the center of the second floor, and it kind of has like its own sort of like wings that sort of like lead into like the walk-in closet area or the bathroom. So far we're kind of like focusing on the bathroom right now, which we kind of create like this very nice sort of like custom sort of sink area unit by utilizing those View Home Decorator simple like cabinet wall units and like sort of placing them next to each other next to the sink units. And I just feel like that always looks nice, and I just really love the way it always turns out. But yeah, this master bedroom does also have its own sort of like living space, but it's kind of like within the bedroom, if that makes sense. So it's not really like in its own room that leads into the bedroom, if that makes sense. But I just feel like it still carries the same amount of sort of like luxuriness and elegance that the other bedroom sort of has as well. But this bedroom does also have two different sort of like sliding doors that lead towards its own sort of like balcony area that overlooks the garden area of this entire home, which I just feel like is very nice and extravagant overall. And I also utilize some of my favorite furniture pieces such as that pastel pop sofa as well as like the luxe seat just to finish up creating that small little like living space that we have inside of the bedroom. And I wanted to accompany the other side of the bedroom by adding a small simple like bookshelf as well as like a nice seating area just to make it feel a bit more lived in and realistic. And we're actually moving on to the walk-in wardrobe now, which is connected to this master bedroom, and I'm actually utilizing the Dream Home Decorator modular sort of like units just to like make it seem like a fully customized sort of like walk-in wardrobe. And I'm actually utilizing a very interesting mirror which actually came from one of the basement kits, and I just feel like it looks really interesting and fit this space really well. And I believe most of the swatches are cracked, and even the default one is as well, but I believe there's like one really dark brown and as well as like the black that is not cracked at all, which I feel like looks really nice, and I just feel like it really fits the overall elegant style that I was kind of going for overall. And moving on to the nursery now, we're actually utilizing quite a lot of the storybook nursery kit as well as like the book nook kit to make this as cozy as possible. So I actually also utilized some Dream Home Decorator modular sort of wardrobe pieces just to like add in some of the baby clothes into there as well as like some of the baby clutter that came from the storybook nursery kit, which I really do actually enjoy using. But I didn't actually utilize quite a lot of the main sort of furniture pieces from that kit, mainly because I wasn't really going for that gothic or really extravagant theme for that sort of like kids room. I was kind of just going for like a neutral sort of bedroom that I was going for like pretty much all of my nurseries. And I just really enjoyed the way it turned out, but I just utilized certain parts of the kit just to like fill it in and just like add some extra details that I feel like wouldn't be possible without using that kit, such as like that simple sort of like baby bag that I added by the sort of like nursery crib, as well as like that very nice simple like baby chandelier, which I really do enjoy using actually. Even if it's not in a nursery, I just really enjoy utilizing it. And we're actually going on to the final floor now, and this is actually one of the bedrooms off the diagonal, which I really did enjoy building. It's just like one of those really huge bedrooms that I love creating, and just added a bunch of different clutter and a lot of like wardrobe pieces and just like a bunch of greenery and whatnot as well, just to like make it feel realistic and lived in. And as well as like adding a very nice desk to it, which I pretty much added in every single one of the bedrooms, and if not, there's also like an office that they can utilize as well. And I just added like a bunch of clutter throughout the entire space to fill it in and just make it look as realistic as possible. And then we also created a very nice and simple bathroom to fit this ensuite of this final bedroom. And we do also have additional bedrooms on this floor, as well as like on the second floor, and additional rooms that I haven't shown, mainly because it would just be very time consuming. However, I have kept all of that in the tour as well, so make sure to stay tuned towards the end of the video to watch the tour so that you guys can see pretty much every single room in this entire build. And yeah, I just went around the entire build now and just added some extra clutter and details throughout the entire build where I thought needed some extra lighting sconces, or whether there was like whether it needed some more seating or some more paintings. And I just populated a bunch of like the hallways and corridors just to make it feel a bit more lived in and realistic, rather than leaving it all like bland and empty, which I feel like really made the entire home come together. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this entire speed build. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you guys think by leaving a like and subscribing, and comment down below if you have any more thoughts and suggestions. I would love to read through them. And I do also have a bunch more videos like this on the channel if you guys are interested in these sort of things. But yeah, thank you very much again for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.